As the UK goes to the polls next year, major political parties are now organising their annual conferences, a final bid to lure voters. The ruling Conservative Party has also kicked off their annual conference, and several people are waiting for the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's speech. Well, Sunak's most anticipated speech will close the Tory annual conference. But several issues are hovering around this speech before it happens. The illegal migration issue, the worst cost of living crisis in decades, and ongoing strikes and countless political scandals. The Tory party, which has been in power since 2010, trails the opposition Labour Party in the opinion polls. Experts predict that Sunak will try to cover as much of the populist approach in his speech, with policy announcements and pivots aimed at drawing dividing lines between the Tory party and the Labour Party. Recently, Sunak also announced a U-turn on a key net zero policy. He's also tipped to announce that the government will scrap the northern leg of the HS2 high-speed train line. On Tuesday, the UK Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, warned that the UK faces a hurricane of immigration.
Now, I can't pretend that politicians have done a great job of managing immigration for the last 30 years. We were too slow to recognise the scale of the problem, too unwilling to accept that our legal framework needed to be updated. And let's be honest, far too squeamish about being smeared as racist to properly bring order to the chaos. But under Rishi Sunak's leadership, things are changing. We are raising our game.
Later this month, the Labour Party is also set to host their annual conference in Liverpool. Labour claims that their leader, Keir Starmer, will be the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. However, the rising cost of living crisis and high bills are going to be a heavy task for them too. Well, for more on this, we're joined by Dr. Nigel Fletcher, a political analyst and commentator, joining us live from London. Nigel, many thanks for your time this morning. Much expected from Rishi Sunak's speech, although a lot of it, has to be said, has been leaked potentially over the past few weeks.
Yes, I think when Rishi Sunak stands up at lunchtime today or this afternoon and gets to the part of his speech where he announces the scrapping of the northern leg of HS2, I think the audience can pretty much join in on the chorus with that, because there's been speculation for weeks, really, going back for quite some time talking about this. It was a leak that sort of happened, that they were considering it, and since then there's been constant speculation. So that will be, I think, one of the least surprising conference announcements that we've seen, already causing huge waves within the party and in the wider political sphere. But there will be other announcements that he makes. Some of the briefing overnight seemed to suggest that this was going to be a much more bold conference speech than we might have expected. There have been quite a lot of cabinet ministers making speeches this week, none of them, frankly, really saying very much of interest in terms of new policy, with the exception of Suella Braverman, as you mentioned in your introduction, who, in her usual style, was quite forthright in her views. But the briefing seems to be that the real interest of this conference will be in what Rishi Sunak has to say, and we'll have to see what it is that he comes out with, alongside the things that we already know about.
Well, Nigel, let's look ahead to the Labour Party's conference, which is going to happen in Liverpool, and they're, of course, going to try and present Sir Keir Starmer as leader in waiting. What's your assessment about what we can expect from the Labour Party conference?
Well, if you look at the opinion polls, that's not a bad forecast, really. I mean, we've seen consistent Labour leads for the last year. When they met at their conference last year, we were in the midst of the very short premiership of Liz Truss. The Conservatives were having a very difficult time during that period after the growth plan, the mini budget. And Labour couldn't really believe their luck. They were quite sort of chipper. This year, I think there's a realisation that they are the front runners to become the government in the next election. And that, in a strange sort of way, imposes a particular discipline on them. It means that the shadow spokespeople have to try and announce policy that is properly costed, that is believable, and they also face a lot more questions from the media about what they're planning to do. So in some ways, I think for the Labour front bench, although they are way ahead in the polls, they expect to have quite an upbeat conference, there is a lot of scrutiny on them. And I think that the question will be, will they be able to sort of seal the deal with the electorate? Do people see Keir Starmer as this Prime Minister in waiting? And actually, what are they promising? Because there's a lot of pressure on them to go further on some of the things that they're planning. Keir Starmer has U-turned on a number of policies over the last year or so, ditching a lot of the things that he promised to his membership. So at the party conference, where you have all of those members turning up to hear the party speak, I think there will be an issue there about whether he's going to come under much more pressure not to drop some more of his programme, or perhaps to revisit some of the decisions that he's made.
Dr. Nigel Fletcher, political analyst and commentator, many thanks for your insight.
Thank you.